Welcome to another episode of the Deals for Dentists podcast. Today we are joined by Dr. Lorne Lavine from Encino, California, and he's the founder of The Digital Dentist. His company provides comprehensive dental technology guidance to dental offices around the country. So go to Deals for Dentist and you'll find their promo listing, which is get a free security audit, which is normally $97. So we love free around here, so that's pretty cool. So thanks for joining us, Dr. Lavine.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I think it's great that you're coming on because I wanted to ask you some questions because as dentists, I feel like we have enough to worry about day in and day out. We have all the clinical responsibilities and patient treatment and care, and we have a business to run that involves a lot of overhead and dealing with insurance companies and staff. There's customer service, there's reputation, management, dealing with all the insurance companies, staff. Did I mention staff? I think a lot of dentists, they get into trouble when they think they can do everything themselves, especially with IT and installation and maintenance. So, for peace of mind, I feel like it's so important to have someone that specializes in IT, especially someone dentally specific. Do you find that a lot of dentists try to do this themselves and get into trouble?
Yeah, it's a common problem. I think one of the challenges that offices have is that, especially when it comes to IT, you don't necessarily see the return on investment up front. You see, you're spending the money, everything's functioning. So, you spent the money, but you're not seeing the return on investment. Where we tend to find people run into those issues is once they need support. Because if you set up your own network and your own IT infrastructure, you're also your IT guy, quote unquote. And the problem, well, there's two problems. First off is that when you do run into trouble, you're not necessarily going to know how to fix it. It's no different than, that patient who shows up with that unspecific pain in the lower right, and you take an X-ray, you do perioprobing, you do a cold test, a heat test, an electrical test, all negative, and you're like, well, something's obviously going on, but I don't know what it is. With IT, there's literally hundreds of components that you have to deal with, so that differential diagnosis can be really challenging. The other problem, of course, is that it's not enough in this modern era to just slap computers and a network together and be done with it. HIPAA is a huge part of how networks have to be set up and maintained. More recently, I think the focus has been on cybersecurity, specifically ransomware, malware, things like that. And again, how you set up the network, how you configure everything is going to play a huge role in how HIPAA compliant you are and how cyber secure you are. So yeah, we do see people that run into problems all the time. And we're happy to take those calls, but a lot of times people call us and they're down, and it's a network we have no familiarity with. So, as much as we want to be able to get them up and running within minutes, it's not typically possible. But we're oftentimes talking multiple hours before we can diagnose and fix the problem.
Yeah, so I have a dental specific CPA, I have a dental specific lawyer, so you're offering dental specific IT services. So I think that's a great niche where you really understand, and you're a dentist yourself, so you understand what goes on in a dental office. People think I'm really techie, because I started a website, but to tell you the truth, during COVID, while we were shut down, I just watched, a million YouTube videos on how to start a website, and a lot of the websites these days are drag and drop. So I'm a disaster when it comes to fixing anything. I could barely change a light bulb. So for me, I'm not messing around. I want a professional IT company that can take care of all of our services and maintenance. And now you are a periodontist, right? How did you become the digital dentist? When did you put the 15C blade down and become the digital dentist?
I'm probably aging myself, but the story, it makes me think of the Grateful Dead with that song, "What a Long Strange Trip It's Been." I was a full-time practicing periodontist. I had no intention of doing anything other than that, with having gone to school until I was 30 years old. So that was the plan. I realized a couple of years into my practice I didn't love doing perio. This was in Vermont in the mid 90s. I was the only periodontist in the state doing implants, which, I had to kind of talk to my referring office and say, hey, I'm a periodontist. I may know a thing or two about soft tissue and bone. I can handle this. But mostly what I was doing was meat and potatoes, osseous surgery and tissue grafts. And I just didn't love it for obvious reasons. And about 3 years into my practice, like a lot of specialists, I had a satellite office, and my satellite was about 45 minutes from my main office. I shared the space with an orthodontist, and he knew I was into technology. My family owns a large electronics distributorship, so I grew up with tech. But this is in the early to mid 90s, so this is long before you have Shine and Patterson and Carestream and all these big. It was all small companies, and so he knew I had I was starting to put the stuff together. I bought an intraoral camera system, but you had to kind of know a little bit about tech to be able to configure with your software and set up all the stuff. There was just no one to hold your hand through that. So he came to me one day and said, hey, Lorne, I know you're into this stuff. I'm thinking about computerizing my office. I got this quote. Do you mind just taking a look and let me know what you think? What I saw just blew me away. It was for 2 computers and software. It was a $50,000 quote. They said they had to buy the computers from them, these HP computers, which they were PCs. I mean, any PC would have worked fine. This was a guy who literally would not have known how to turn the computer on. And I started thinking to myself, I said, it's really too bad that dentists don't have someone that they can turn to that, yes, understands technology, but also understands things from a dentist standpoint. And all of a sudden, this light bulb went off on my head, and I thought, well, I can do that. And started reaching out to my referring offices and said, hey, I'm happy to help you. And they took advantage of that. And they started telling their friends who were not referring offices, which I figured, okay, I should probably be charging for my time now, because I was doing this in between weekends and evenings and in between patients sometimes. And it was just like, okay, I'm getting really busy with this. I went to an AAP meeting in the year 2000, and I was introduced as a technology expert. It was a technology day. Within maybe an hour, I had 150 business cards that were plopped in my lap, all people that wanted to work with me. And I realized at that point, okay, I need to make a decision for what I want to do going forward. Right around this time is when California passed licensure by credential. I had gone to USC for college. I had friends and family out here. So the licensure went into effect July 1st, 2002. I sold my practice, and by June of 2002, moved out here thinking I would practice 3-4 days a week, do my consulting a day or 2 a week, and maybe 5 years, 10 years, whatever, I could flip the ratio or get out of practice completely. They kind of left out the part about the 15,000 people on the waiting list. So I got out here thinking I would be associated in some practices, and it turns out I couldn't practice at all. It was going to be a good year before I could practice. So I started doing what I'm doing now, and I got about as lucky as a human being can get, that within the first month of me moving out here, Howard Ferran, who runs Dentaltown, he had seen some of my posts on the Dentaltown website that they had just started a few months before that. He said, hey, Lorne, can you maybe be like the moderator of these forums and contribute as much as you can? I said, sure, I'm happy to do that. A couple of weeks after that, Joe Blaze, who was the editor of Dental Economics, reached out to me and said, hey, we need a technology editor for our magazine. Would you be willing to do that? I said, sure. So literally within my first month of moving here, my name was getting out there across the whole country between Dentaltown and Dental Economics, and it just took off. And to this day, a good 80-85% of our clients are out of state. So people know me because I write for those magazines. I write for DPR. I've been on Dentaltown, the website, since 2002. I've got like 18,000 posts on there. I don't moderate the forums anymore, but I'm still very active on there. So like I said, I just got really lucky that I came out here and I'm able to do what I wanted to do. I still work with dentists every single day like I did when I was a periodontist. So it's been, like you mentioned, it's been huge for my business that when I work with an office, they don't just see me as the IT guy. I'm a colleague. I walk the walk, I talk the talk. I understand how critical it is for them to be up and running. I understand ergonomic issues. I understand about front desk issues. So that really gives me a leg up when I'm working with an office if they're comparing quotes from different IT providers.
It sounds like great timing, on your part, and I want to cue the Led Zeppelin song "Going to California" right now. So now you didn't get bitten by like a genetically modified spider that turned you into the digital dentist. You just this was all from years of you kind of doing this on your own. Do you know how to code?
No, no. I mean, I took programming in high school. This was like Fortran and BASIC. This is
Right.
long before. This is in the 70s. I don't know how to code. I certainly know how to evaluate software programs for what I think is good or not, and I know what dental offices are looking for. But no, it was just growing up in that environment in tech. Along the way, I became certified. I'm what's called an A plus certified repair technician. I'm a Network Plus certified. It doesn't really mean anything to our clients. It just means that I've done additional work and been certified, that I kind of know what I'm talking about for the most part. I've gotten HIPAA certifications along the way as well. But usually, as I said, for most offices, they just want someone that can understand their needs, that listens to them, that understands dental applications, isn't going into a blind. Our approach when we work with an office, we don't want to ever say to somebody, well, I think this will work, or it should work, or it might work. It's, yeah, I know this works because I already do it for 47 other offices, and I'm pretty confident that it's going to work for you as well. So yeah, no genetically modified spider bite or anything
Spider
like
bite. Because with me, I have this very sophisticated system where if something's not working, I'll unplug it and then replug it. If that doesn't work, then I call IT. So that's typically how I do it. So I'd be calling you for a problem because
Actually, I mean, that works a lot of the times, surprisingly.
oh, good, there you go.
Rebooting the computer is often one of the first things that we do. As you mentioned, it's not usually the only thing you need to do, but sometimes that is your best first step. A lot of times that will resolve the problem on its own.
So now, what is your process? You have the audit. Is that like your gateway into the office, and then from there you kind of create a treatment plan of what they need, and you customize it per office and their needs?
Yeah, exactly. So, I took a lot of my dental training and dental concepts to IT as well. When I was a full-time practicing periodontist, I would never treat a patient unless I diagnosed and treatment plan first, unless it was emergency or something like that. And with the way that I run my IT business is exactly the same way. You can't treatment plan or game plan for a client unless you diagnose first. One thing that I always try to make sure that people understand is that what we do, the thing that we're offering for people on the website for free, is what we call a security audit or a tech audit. It's not the same as a risk assessment. There is a HIPAA law that says you have to do a formal risk assessment. When we do a risk assessment, it's a much more involved process. It takes about 5 to 8 hours. We develop a full treatment plan. We include some type of cyber liability insurance, a manual. It's much more involved. The tech audit is kind of designed to be that 30,000-foot view from above. What's going on here? We look at the low-hanging fruit. What are you guys doing for backup? How are you emailing other offices? Have you ever done that risk assessment? Do you have a manual? Are you patching your systems? Do you have a firewall? Do you have ransomware protection and antivirus software? Have you done training on your staff? Things that we can usually elicit in about a 30 to 40-minute phone call and hopping onto the network, running some tests as well. Once we do that, we have a much better idea of what are the things that they need to do. We talk interchangeably a lot about HIPAA and cybersecurity. The one and only good news with all of that is that for the most part, the things that you do to get your practice more secure are also going to get you more HIPAA compliant as well. Now, there are, of course, some exceptions to that, but a lot of the stuff that is in the HIPAA rules are things that you should be doing anyways. You should be backing up and have a firewall and antivirus, all things that are common sense for most offices. But you're kind of killing two birds with one stone if you can get yourself cyber secure. You don't have to worry as much about getting yourself as HIPAA compliant at the same time.
So the audit is a pretty quick process. It's totally different than the risk assessment, but the audit Typically, how long does that take? Did you say just?
30, 40 minutes. On the phone, it may take us 5 to 10 minutes. We'll hop onto the network with the office's permission. They can watch what we're doing. We gather data. We want to see, is the server up to date? Do you have enough storage in there? Do you have enough memory? Is there any errors in the error logs that are concerning? We'll look at a few of the workstations. We don't typically go through all of them, but we just want to get an idea. If they say, yes, we have some Windows 7 computers, which are a HIPAA concern right now, and a security concern because Microsoft stopped supporting Windows 7 back in January of this year. But there's certain things that we can't see just by hopping onto a network. We don't know, how are you guys emailing other offices, and when's the last time you did a risk assessment, and have you done any training on it? So it'll take maybe 10 minutes of talking with the office to get some information, another 20 to 30 minutes for us to gather the information being on the network. And then, of course, we all want to talk with the dentist afterwards for 15, 20 minutes. It's however much time they want. We send a full report. Here's what we found. Here's our biggest concerns. Here's what we recommend that you do. Here's what your options are. Here's what everything would cost. Here's the order that we would do it in if you want to sequence it, because certain things are more critical than others. And we go from there. So like I said, 30, 40 minutes for us to do the evaluation, another 20, 30 minutes tops to go over it with the office. And then, of course, it's completely up to them how they want to proceed.
Now, will you actually look at the office's hardware? So if I actually walked around with my iPad and showed you what we're using for hardware, and will you guide us on what hardware you recommend and what we need to change?
Yeah, and for the most part, most of the offices that we work with, unless they're running an outdated operating system, the two concerns with an operating system that's outdated, number one, is that there's no patches for that. Microsoft ended support for Server 2008 and Windows 7 in January of this year. For Microsoft XP before that, it was in 2014. I think the next big one would be in 2023, I think is the next time that we're going to have to go through this again. So you do have that security concern, because if you're not being patched, even though people tend to focus a lot on firewalls and ransomware protection and antivirus software, an unpatched operating system is a significant risk. It's a way that a lot of malware can get onto your network. The second thing is HIPAA. Now, people will sometimes say to me, hey, there's nothing in HIPAA that says you can't run Windows 7. And that is correct. HIPAA was smart enough to realize technology changes, we can't specify operating systems. What they do say, we talked about this a bit earlier, is that you must do a risk assessment. That is a law. When you do that risk assessment, you're going to find certain things that show up on there that you have to take care of. Doing a treatment plan for a patient isn't enough. You have to do the actual treatment to resolve the issues. Same thing with HIPAA, is that once you've done that risk assessment, you then are obligated to mitigate those risks and deal with the risk. And in my opinion, an outdated operating system, there is no mitigation for that other than replacing it. But for the most part, most of the offices we work with, as long as their hardware is running Server 2012 or 2016 or 2019, if they're on Windows 10, we typically don't have to replace the hardware unless they tell us, hey, we've noticed that the servers are crashing a lot, and I got this computer 6 years ago, and in those cases, and of course, we will be recommended. Everything has to be replaced at some point, and we usually tell people 3 to 5 years for workstations, 5 to 7 years for servers, but your mileage may vary. It just depends on how often you're updating your software and what other software applications you're running and how many computers you have on the network. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. But to answer your question, yes, well, of course, we can evaluate the hardware remotely and make some recommendations if the hardware needs to be replaced, what we would recommend, what it would cost, and what the options are.
So we don't necessarily need to go out and buy the most expensive gaming, system as far as hardware. Something that, as long as we're not skimping on the specs and it's a decent piece of equipment, then we should get about 5 or so years out of them.
Yeah, the only time that you definitely don't need gaming systems. The one and only time that we do recommend similar specs for that are for cone beam computers. For a computer that captures it, which is called the RCU, And typically, if you're only looking at 2D slices of the cone beam images, then you can just use any old, we normally recommend a Core i5 and 16 gigs of RAM. But if you want to actually manipulate those images, twist them around and do all the things you do with 3D, you're going to need a separate video card. Most of the times, a computer has a video chip built into the motherboard. That's fine for 2D. It's not great for 3D manipulation. It's going to be really choppy. So in those cases, we are actually recommending gaming quality type systems, a Core i7, at least 16 gigs of RAM, that separate video card that can have at least 2 gigabytes of video RAM on it. But other than that, for running practice management software, for running 2D imaging, digital x-rays, all the other stuff, you don't need to go crazy. The one thing that we always caution people on is that the lower the specs are that you get, the sooner you're going to have to replace those computers. So in the long run, you're really not saving anything. We tend to go more higher end on the specs. We want to do like an M.2 SSD video card. We like to do the Core i5 or a Core i7. We like to do 16 gigs of RAM. We want those computers to last 4 or 5, hopefully more years than that if possible. If someone gets the lowest specs that they can, the minimum specs that your practice management software would recommend, it'll work fine, but usually by year 3, maybe into year 4, at that point you're needing to replace it. So in my mind, you haven't really gained all that much in the long run.
Is there any company you recommend, like Dell, or what's your go-to system?
We use Dell, and as I mentioned to you, because we have such a huge majority of our clients are out of state, we can handle 99.9% of the issues that crop up remotely. We can log onto the system, do whatever needs to be done. We have a network of people all over North America, so the different office really needed someone on site, we could get someone out there within a day or so. But for Dell, one of the reasons we like working with Dell is that they have their own network of people all over the country. So if we did determine that it was a hardware issue, so a part needs to be replaced, we typically get the server with a 4-hour contract. So Dell has to be there within 4 hours with that part. Workstations, we normally do it next business day just because it costs a fortune to have those same-day contracts on the workstations. But that's the beauty of Dell, is that they'll come out and replace that part, which we obviously, we're not going to fly out to Boston to swap out a memory card. I mean, that's going to take, it would cost thousands of dollars, and most of our clients would not want to do that. So.
And what kind of hard drive are you recommending for a server or for a workstation?
For the workstations, we're doing M.2 SSDs. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They look almost like RAM video chips. It's actually flat and it looks like a RAM chip. It's not the traditional boxy hard drive. They're super fast. They're very durable. We've had good luck with them. We've never recommended any type of SSD for a server, even though, I know that they work. And my own personal experience is they're just not as durable in the long run as mechanical drives. We're doing faster mechanical drive, 7.2K or 10K RPM drives. But the servers are normally, we like to use what's called encrypted drives, self-encrypted drives, because there is a HIPAA law that you have to encrypt the data. So we like to do that. And because of the fact that the need for storage just increases exponentially over time, we're doing huge drives. Our standard server has 4 terabyte drives. We do 2 drives that are mirrored. It's a RAID configuration. They mirror each other so that if one drive fails, the other one takes over. But if you want to do an SSD drive for 4 terabytes, I mean, that's going to cost you an arm and a leg. So because of that, and it's because of the durability and predictability, we tend to still recommend mechanical drives for servers.
Yeah, I remember once we got our CT scan, that became a major change as far as our memory card, and the amount of data that a CT scan uses is unbelievable. So I think we're at about 4 terabytes as well. It's amazing. My first computer was 1998. I got the IBM Aptiva. I think the entire system was 1 gigabyte, and that was like state of the art back then. I mean, it's when the fans went off in that computer, it sounded like a helicopter was inside. And now, Joseph here just got a iPhone 11, and there's 128 gigabytes just in that phone. it's unbelievable how things have changed.
Yeah, I kind of
Um,
predate you a little bit there. My first computer was when I built with my best friend in 1978. This is long even before floppy drives. We had to use a cassette tape as the storage medium. So it's definitely unbelievable how much it changed. And now it's just the growth is exponential. I mean, stuff that you get. And people always ask me like, should I hold off or should I wait for this processor? Should I wait for this? I was like, no, because as soon as you get it, it's pretty much obsolete. You know, there's something new coming out. So get based on your current needs, not on what you think you're going to need down the road.
well, like you just said, I mean, technology, it's constantly changing. You gotta, I mean, it's always something new. Now, will you, let's say I just opened my office, will you advise me on everything from, the practice management software to imaging software, or what kind of server to get, x-rays? Will you guide me through all of that if that's the need that I have?
And beyond. So the first step, of course, is to advise and guide. And we do that always for anyone that asks. We'll let them know what we recommend for everything from the server, workstations, monitors, mounts, printers, digital x-rays, cameras, cone beam, digital pans, scanners, fax machines, audio visual, everything. Where a lot of people tend to go to the next step is that they want to work with us to actually help get the hardware. We can almost always get better pricing than what an office can get on their own. For anyone that's out of state, they don't have to deal with sales tax, so we get to save on the tax as well. Now for California, obviously we have to charge tax, but we don't have, we're not licensed in any other state to collect sales tax other than in California. So you get some savings there. We can set it up, we install it, we test it, we verify it. And then most of our clients will then go to the next phase, which is that it's not enough to just have a working network. It has to be HIPAA compliant, it has to be cyber secure. So there's a number of services that almost all offices need. Backup and disaster recovery, patching, firewalls, ransomware is probably the biggest concern right now. Staff, I mean, all the things that, we're what's called a managed service provider. And IT has changed over the last 5-10 years or so. Most of the IT systems in the past were what's called break fix. Something breaks or you break it and you call us up and we fix it. What we've oftentimes found is that by the time it's broken and by the time you call us, it's already fairly involved. You've got a virus that's already done a lot of damage, or a hard drive that was starting to fail has now completely failed. So we want to know about these things earlier in that whole process. And the best analogy I can give you is this: when I did Perio, there's a reason I put people on a 3-month recall. It was because I wanted to catch things at an earlier stage. I wanted to be more proactive, more conservative in how I took care of the problem. Same thing with IT. We want to catch these things at an earlier stage. So most IT providers have moved to this model of what's called managed services, where it's a fancy way of saying automation, that the backup's automated, the patching's automated, the firewall's automated, the ransomware protection is all automated. Yes, we have to monitor it and we have to step in and resolve those issues. It's basically monthly billing for services versus just waiting for there to be a problem. Now, we certainly do have clients that still want to just get like a block of support time with us. They'd rather handle all the IT, the other IT stuff on their own and just want to call us when there's a problem. Fine, we're happy to do that. But as I said, with HIPAA being such a big thing and with ransomware being an even bigger thing, the majority of our clients are saying, hey, we want you guys to really monitor and manage this for us. We don't want to be that office that finds out they got hit with a ransomware and now they got to tell other patients that they got hit and notify the local news stations and be listed on the Health and Human Services website. That's, a breach is probably about the worst thing that could happen to an office in my mind. And a lot of our clients say, yeah, we don't want to have to spend monthly on these services, but compared to what it would cost for a breach, even, HIPAA has different levels of breaches, even what they call to be the lowest level of breach, which is not only did you not know that there was a problem, but realistically, you shouldn't have known. I mean, it's that obscure of an issue they're still going to charge you $25,000 to $50,000 as a fine. Not to mention, of course, whatever you lose from having to write that letter to the patients about the breaches and legal fees, and it's considered standard of care to provide some type of credit monitoring for those people if you've been breached. So it can get very expensive. So because of all that, most of our clients want to, they'd rather pay a little bit now than a lot later.
Oh, it's peace of mind. I mean, to have everything automated like that, you don't want to have to be thinking about that in the back of your mind when you're, creating sleepless nights to worry about, HIPAA. And now, like we were saying, technology is constantly changing. Are the HIPAA laws constantly changing, especially during the COVID era?
No, there's been, so the final HIPAA laws were the omnibus rules that came out in 2013. What we're seeing over the last few years is some modification on the interpretation of those laws. When COVID came out, actually, Health and Human Services sent out a memo specifically reminding people you're still liable for all this stuff. There's no, get out of jail free card because it's during COVID. The one thing that they did say was, for example, if somebody's been incapacitated with a coronavirus, that they can, healthcare providers can communicate with their family. Normally, you would need some type of written permission from the patient, but again, if they're not conscious or they're intubated, then obviously they don't have that option. But as far as the HIPAA laws about privacy and security, they went out of their way to remind people, hey, COVID doesn't mean that we're not. Now, of course, there's less people working, so your chances of an audit back then were, I think, lower. But that's, now that offices are back and working, I don't think that's the case any longer. I think you're always at risk.
So anytime you're sharing patient information, whether it's to a lab or to a specialty office that you refer cases to, everything has to be encrypted, correct? It's email or any file sharing. I can't just, send an email through my regular Gmail with attachments of an X-ray. It's all got to be encrypted, correct?
Correct. Now you have one option. It was if you can get the patient to sign some type of waiver. It has to be signed. It has to be in writing that they say, "Hey, I'm okay if you communicate with Dr. Block and use regular Gmail, and I'm okay if you communicate with me." If you've got that in writing, then you can do that. Otherwise, no. And the biggest resistance we get to encrypted email, because most of the better systems make it super easy. You don't have to change your email address. If you're used to using Outlook, you can continue to use Outlook. If you're used to using a web portal, you use a web portal. So they're relatively easy to use. Where we get the resistance is they say, I want to do it, but the offices I send to are always complaining that, hey, I got to log in with my username and password to view this email. And what we tell those offices is, listen, you need to have the approach that you're helping them. And the reason you're helping them is that HIPAA, the Health and Human Services, Office of Civil Rights, they don't care how the electronic protected health information got onto your system. Once it's there, you own it. So let's say you send somebody an unprotected regular Gmail email. It goes onto their laptop gets stolen. They've suffered a breach because that information was in there. Versus if you had sent them an email to their laptop that said, "Hey, Dr. Block, I sent you this encrypted email, click here." If that laptop is stolen, assuming that they weren't already logged into that email, they have not suffered a breach. So you're protecting the recipient as much as you're protecting yourself. So, and most of the better systems are unbelievably inexpensive. Most of our clients are spending $40-50 a month for 4 or 5 user accounts. It's $8 to $10 per user per month. It's kind of considered the status quo. And if you're a Gmail user, you can get a paid version of Gmail called G Suite. I think that's changed the name recently. But it's going to be much more HIPAA compliant than your regular Gmail. So you don't really need to change a whole lot to have a really decent encrypted email system that's going to get you more compliant and protect you. And patients, certainly, they come to expect it. They get encrypted emails from their bank and from insurance companies, whatever. So it's not a big pain for them to have to use a username and a password to see an email from you.
Is that the biggest breach typically is through email?
It's actually the second most common. The most common one out there is a lost or stolen mobile device.
Hmm.
External hard drive that people are using for backup would be probably be number one. Laptops would be up there. Some people, for reasons I don't quite understand, will put patient photos on their cell phones. So that would be a reason as well. But the only we talked about this get out of jail free card. The only get out of jail free card you have when it comes to mobile devices is encryption. If
Hmm.
you've encrypted that external hard drive, if you've encrypted the laptop and it's stolen, by definition, you do not have to declare a breach as long as you've got some documentation that, yeah, we encrypted it on this date and we use this encryption. If you can prove that it was encrypted, then you do not have to declare that breach. So,
Hmm.
and it's always amazing to me that offices don't do that because all server operating systems from 2012 onwards, Windows 10, they all have a built-in encryption program called BitLocker. It's free. Now, typically, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to want to pay an IT company for a few hours of their time to actually encrypt it for you. But it's not like you have to go out and spend thousands of dollars on special encryption software. It's already built into Windows. So it's really, there's no excuse for, in my mind, for not encrypting it because it's going to protect you. It's going to get you more HIPAA compliant. And if you could avoid that breach notification, to me, having to declare a breach of all the things that you have to deal with HIPAA, that is far and away the worst thing that could ever happen to an office. We've had offices that have gone through that. They've had to send that letter out. On average, they lose about 15 to 20% of their patient
Oh
population
yeah,
within
yeah.
2 weeks. Yeah, it's just, just imagine as a patient, you get a letter from your dentist. Oh, by the way, we're really sorry, but we've been breached. We may have compromised your social security number. We may have compromised your credit card information. You're not going to be happy about that. So it's very, in my mind, completely avoidable.
Yeah, the $25,000 fine is nothing compared to losing 20% of your patients. That is unbelievably scary. Um, so now, do you help train the staff and the dentist on all of this and how to be compliant? You do the risk assessment, and then do you go through what's your process after that and getting everyone up to speed?
So yeah, so whether we've done the technical audit, we review all this stuff with them. The risk assessment, which is typically one of the first things on our list that we find that the office hasn't done it, or they've done something just completely half-assed, where they went online and took a questionnaire for 10 minutes, and hey, that's my risk assessment. One of the challenges with HIPAA is that because they know HIPAA applies to all covered entities, and a solo dental office is no different than a large hospital group. They're all covered under the same paint strokes. So HIPAA realized, we can't be that specific. We have to make it somewhat ambiguous, somewhat, up to the office to determine what's best. When it comes to a risk assessment, if you actually look up the HIPAA rules, it's literally one sentence. You have to do a risk assessment. There's
Mm-hmm.
no guidance. Now, that being the case, there is a document, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. They have this document 800-30, which tells you how to do a risk assessment. It supposedly only applies to federal health institutions, but it's the only thing out there. So basically all the auditors use it. It's about 100 pages long. I can sort of give you the Reader's Digest version of it, which is you need to be comprehensive. You need to look at all your IT systems. You need to look at your physical systems in your office, alarms and where charts are located. You need to have policies and procedures, all the administrative stuff. But you must do that risk assessment. When we go through that process with our clients, they tend to, that in itself is part of the educational process that they get to see, okay, we never had, we have usernames and passwords for Open Dental, but we don't have them for the computers, which you need to have them for the computers. One of the things that HIPAA says you have to track who accessed the patient information, when did they access it, what did they do with it? Well, that's easy to do with your practice management software. There's an audit trail. But what about the images or your emails or QuickBooks or Invisalign or Word documents or spreadsheets? Anything that's got a patient name, is treated the same way as your practice management data. So as we go through that risk assessment and mitigating the risk, it is an educational process. We don't directly train offices on how to do, how to get up to speed on HIPAA, just because there are online courses out there that do it far better than we can. So we'll recommend, a couple of ones that we've partnered with where they'll go online, they take the course. It usually takes, I don't know, 45 minutes or so. They can stop and start whenever they want. They take a quiz at the end, which is almost impossible to fail. You get a certificate that says, yes, you've been trained. You stick it in your manual. And how often you train again is really up to most offices. We normally recommend yearly. HIPAA says you need to do it on a quote unquote regular basis. I think you can make the argument that, hey, we haven't changed anything in our office. We have the same staff. It's all the same systems. We'll do it every couple of years. I don't think you would lose that argument with a HIPAA auditor, but it's never a bad idea, especially because it's such an easy process that on a yearly basis, just to do a refresher for everybody and get up to speed on it. Now, again, with a lot of the HIPAA stuff, it's not so much that you do what you need to do to get yourself compliant. It's have you documented? Do you have evidence of that if you ever get audited? So that's why we recommend, say, an online course that will give you a certificate versus some type of informal lunch and learn where everyone kind of sits around and talks about it for an hour or two. That's may not carry as much weight with an auditor as actual certificate that says you've done this.
Who actually would audit you? Is that the Department of Health for each state?
Yeah, it's Health and Human Services, Office of Civil Rights. It depends where the breach or where the notification came from. When the omnibus rules were passed in 2013, they made it much easier for patients or for people that wanted to report a breach to do it through the federal system. But a lot of times, a lot of the audits that we've seen have been originated through state dental boards. That patients, a patient got an email designed for another patient that had someone else's x-rays in there, and they sent something to the dental board. Or unfortunately, we've seen, it's not a nice thing to say, but we've seen sometimes where competing offices have reported an office that they wanted to mess with their heads. I don't know what they wanted to do, but there's a lot of ways it can come in. If it gets to that state dental board, if it gets through OCR or HHS, they're going to follow up. So that's how the whole process is. And there's still random audits that occur. They haven't done it as much in the last few years, certainly now with COVID, not as much, but there was a time back in 2014, 2015, where there were thousands of random audits being done as well. So it's still out there.
Okay, can you explain, let's move on to ransomware, because that is a scary term. I picture like some angry patient that, kind of like Mr. Robot. He's the nerdy guy in the coffee shop with his, hoodie on, and he's hacking into your computer and demanding a certain amount of money to release your information. How does ransomware work?
To me, of all the things that a dental office has to worry about when it comes to IT systems, ransomware is far and away the worst. A ransomware virus is a virus that gets onto your system, and there's multiple ways that can happen, and it locks your files. And typically, it's going to be accompanied with some type of pop-up that you go to open up your practice management software one morning, and all of a sudden, this pop-up comes up there, says your files have been locked. You need to pay X dollars to get them unlocked, or you need to contact us this way. They don't take checks, they don't take cash, they don't take credit cards. It's got to be through untraceable, encrypted means like Bitcoin or something similar to that. It's particularly nasty for a few reasons. First off, it's going to ruin your day and potentially multiple days, because it's not enough to just pay the ransom and hope that maybe you're going to get the unlock key. You want to remove that ransomware. So unless you've got a lot of extensive IT experience, you're wanting an IT company to get involved to figure out where it came in and eliminated that initially. Then you have to deal with the actual encrypted files. The easiest way to deal with without having to pay the ransom is hopefully you got some type of offsite backup that you can restore from. The problem that we've seen recently with that is that the criminals who are putting out ransomware have gotten smarter. They understand that people are going to probably restore their backups. So they've been telling offices, we don't care if you restore from your backup or not. You don't pay. We're putting your stuff online. We're going to let everybody know about it. So, they're getting really mean about it and really forcing you. We've also seen a number of instances where the ransomware isn't just a single ransomware virus. It's multiple. There might be 10, 15, 20 different viruses, each one requiring a ransom that'll only unlock part of the database. The other thing that people should be aware of is that there was a huge outbreak in 2019 of ransomware. There were 400 dental offices in Wisconsin that were hit with a virus. There were about 100 in Colorado, lots of other things. And unfortunately, those actually came through their IT companies. That all of us in IT, we need to be able to remotely access systems and be able to manage that for our clients. The portals that we use have to be secure, because if someone gets into that portal, they don't just have access to my data, they now have access to the hundreds and hundreds of offices that we support. So those companies, a while ago set up, I'm sure everyone knows what two-factor authentication is, where you log into a website and then you get another code sent to your cell phone or to your email that you have to enter that second code. All of them have set that up, but these IT companies back last year, for whatever reason, hadn't done that, or maybe they were using a free version. I don't know the full story. So, it's one thing that people need to know about. It's not just enough that you do as a dentist what you need to do to protect yourself from ransomware, but you need to make sure that your IT company is following best practices, that if they do have remote access set up, that they have some type of two-factor authentication or some type of IP restrictions. Like every computer in the world has what's called an IP address, Internet Protocol address. It's unique for that system, so that you can say to the web portal, hey, only let in these computers at these IP addresses and nobody else. So it is a huge risk, and unfortunately, it requires a lot of steps, because the approach that we take is, you want to make sure that you can deal with it once it gets on there, but you really don't want it on there in the first place. One thing that a lot of offices probably are not aware of, I'm sure a lot of these offices in Wisconsin that were hit didn't know this, is that if you're hit with a ransomware virus, you suffered a breach. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, that a breach, it's very clear cut with HIPAA, unlike a lot of their ambiguous rules and regulations. Breach notification is clear cut. You've got to notify those patients and notify Health and Human Services, the local news media, unless you have encryption in place, that you have to do those steps. And most of us think of a breach as, well, you lost that external hard drive, that laptop, or someone hacked into your network. The way that Health and Human Services defines a breach is loss of control of your data, which is exactly what a ransomware does. So there actually was Health and Human Service released something, I think it was in 2016, that said, unless you know for sure that this did not come from a malicious source, and that they didn't look at the data, which of course you can't do, if you are hit with a ransomware virus, you've suffered a breach, you have to notify those patients. So it's nasty. So, we normally recommend multiple steps, a great firewall to make sure it doesn't get in there in the first place. If it is going to get through, you want not just regular antivirus software, but ransomware specific software. You've got to have a really good backup in place, and have it offsite, so that you can restore if you need to. You need to have ideally some type of breach insurance in place, so that if you do get dinged, that and you do get a HIPAA fine, that you're going to be covered for that. There's a new technology which is actually really exciting for us that we've just started exploring. We've done some beta tests for some of our offices. All ransomware and most viruses, for that most part, they're little tiny programs, and the program has to run in order to do the things that it needs to do to lock the files and do all the damage it needs to do. So the new concept is what's called application whitelisting, and ring fencing is a term that's used as well. The way that it works is that we'll run software that basically sits on our client's network for a few weeks, and it monitors all the running programs that are on there. It says, okay, I see that Dentrix is running here. I see you got Dexis. I see you're running Adobe. It makes an inventory of every single program that's running on every single computer. At a certain point, usually a couple of weeks later, we flip the switch. And at that point, it runs in what's called deny all mode. Any program that it's already approved will run just fine. Any new program that it doesn't recognize cannot run. It actually gets blocked. So it's an interesting way of dealing with ransomware that we now have this technique of saying, hey, we're not going to allow any program to run. Now, there's a downside to it that every time you update your software, which you should be doing, you should be patching it, it's going to recognize it as a new program. We have to, tell it, okay, this is okay again. So there's a lot of manual input into it. But either way, it's just one other tool that we think is going to be available for our clients to be able to protect themselves from ransomware. Because as I said, I think ransomware is the biggest threat to dental offices. Certainly the HIPAA part is part of it, but the loss of data and loss of patients and having to send out those letters, I think would just be deadly for a significant portion of offices.
Yeah, it sounds like a double whammy where you have the breach and then you're locked out of your system. So how does that work? And how much does a ransomware, if I'm going to pay it, let's say I'm a solo practitioner, what does a typical ransomware cost for me to get that unlock key?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on how many viruses are on there. It depends on if they know what type of office you are. We've seen most of our clients, we've had a few people in the past, they weren't on, they didn't have us managing it for them. They didn't have firewalls in place or ransomware protection. The average office that we work with that's paid the ransom has paid between $700 and $2,500. That's average. We've had a few that have been a little bit more than that, but it's somewhere in that range. But as you mentioned, the biggest concern is that by the time we figure out where the ransomware got into the system, getting it resolved, you're looking at least a day of downtime, if not more. The lost production there obviously is going to add multiple thousands onto that total. So you never know. It runs the gamut. So, again, if you can prevent that from ever happening in the first place, to me, that's a far better option than having to, oh my God, we got a ransomware. How do we get our data back?
I imagine that could be a lot higher of a ransom if you're a multi-location practice or a large DSO, compared to a solo practitioner.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. It's up there. We've seen, unfortunately, some instances where people paid the ransom and they didn't get the key. It's not most of them. Most of the times they will provide that key because, of course, if word gets out that you pay the ransom and you're not going to get the unlock key, people will just stop paying it. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy if they don't provide the key. But there have been a few cases where people have not gotten that key, and you're dead in the water. You're not going to get that data back.
Now, can these slip in through opening a sketchy email? Is that a lot of times how it
email is the most common way of that happening? That you get an email that looks like it might be valid. It has a link that it wants you to click. Sometimes it can be just going to a website that you shouldn't have gone to. As I mentioned earlier, an unpatched operating system can be a point of entry as well. A lot of times people just download free stuff. Like, oh, I want this cute little screensaver, or I want this little free program. A lot of times those are just infiltrated with ransomware viruses or other types of viruses. So you really need to be careful with a lot of that stuff. That's part of the training that we do with our offices, is to make sure they understand how to recognize valid from invalid emails, how to hover your mouse over the link to see if it is a valid link. And we always recommend, if it wasn't an email that you weren't expecting, don't click on the link. If it's for like an insurance thing, just go directly to the website and enter the information there. A lot of times some of those fake websites, they look very real. It can be really hard if you don't have experience in dealing with these types of sites to be able to tell the real ones from the fake ones. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm officially not sleeping tonight because of this conversation, but with Halloween coming up, I am going to dress up as the digital dentist instead of my typical Top Gun Maverick.
You need a lot more gray hair, a lot less hair. What else? You need all kinds of aches and pains, and
yeah, I have those. So I thanks so much for joining us. I really think that call a professional to take care of your IT. For peace of mind, dentists, we have so much to worry about, clinically, dealing with the business side of things, taking care of our patients, the staff, taking care of our overhead. So I think it's really important to have a safe and secure and dental specific IT company. So any last nuggets or words of wisdom for those young dentists out there?
Yeah, just please feel free to take advantage of the special. We normally charge $97 for it. It's free. Anyone that's ever worked with me knows that we are not a high pressure group at all. That's something I pride myself on making sure that we don't do. It's all about education, about understanding where you're at, what you need to do. Yes, these are all things that we provide. Of course, we would be thrilled to work with any office to help get them more compliant, more cyber secure, but there's zero obligation. You'll have the information at your fingertips, whether it's to work with us or try to do it on your own, or you're an IT company you're already working with. That's up to you. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you know where you may be at risk and what are the steps that you need to take to resolve those risks, and how you do that is completely up to you. We're there to guide you and help you. We're not there to hold a gun to your head and say, do it or else. So we would love to work with anyone that's watching this, or anyone that goes to the website and wants to take advantage of the special. We'll definitely give you more information than you knew before you went in, and then how you deal with that is completely up to you.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us today. Again, this is Dr. Lorne Lavine. He's the founder of The Digital Dentist, and he provides comprehensive dental technology guidance. Go to dealsfordentist.com, and you can go to the Digital Dentist listing and mention Deals for Dentists to get a free security audit, which is normally $97. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and let's be in touch in the next 6 months or so, and see what's going on in your world, and keep up to date with all the digital technology out there and being secure.
Great. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.